In this lesson, we are going to talk about the return statement. So far in all of the methods that you have written, we haven't been able to get any primitive data back, and we haven't been able to get our more complex data, our objects back in a safe way without side effects. The return statement is going to allow us to solve both of those problems. I've set up some code. Let's take a look at it. So I've set up this class, the bigger class, and I've started our main method. Now let's go ahead and create a method that finds the bigger of two integers. And we're going to want to get back whichever the bigger of those two integers are. So let's go ahead and set up an integer x, and let's give our integer x the value of 10. And we're going to create an integer y and give our integer y a value of 11. So we already know intuitively 11 should be the biggest number. Now, before we go on, we're going to need to write our method that will find which one of two integers, is going to be the biggest number. So let's scroll down here before we finish our main method. I'll go ahead and put a closing curly brace. I know I'm not going to need too many lines, so that will be my main method. And let's put in our new method right below it. So we're going to create a public static, and we're going to now change that keyword void. We're now going to put the return type, and in this case we're going to put integer. A method can only have one return type. Only one type. And it can only have one value. We'll talk about what that means in a second. So only one value can be passed back. And then we're going to go ahead and call this method, let's go ahead and call it getBigger. That could be a slightly confusing name, but we know what it means in this instance. And we're going to take in two integers as our parameters. We're going to set two integers as our parameters, int a, and a comma, and int b. Okay, so this is the header for our method. Next, what we're going to do is we're going to compare integer a and integer b. So let's go ahead and write that. So if integer a is bigger than, and we'll go ahead and say equal to make sure we cover the entire number line. It's bigger than or equal to b. Then I'm going to go ahead and say, I'm going to use my keyword here, return. So this is my new keyword, return. It's a reserved word in Java, and I'm going to say return integer a. And whatever precedes, whatever the evaluation of that return statement is, this data type must match this data type here. Same type. It must. You will get an error in Java if this data type does not match that data type. Now, something to know about the return keyword is it kicks you out wherever you are. Out wherever you are. So be careful with this, that the return statement can stop a loop. Maybe you want that loop to keep going after you found something and finish up processing some data. The return statement will kick you out and end your loop wherever you are. That can also be valuable for you if maybe you don't want to keep searching after you've found something. You can stop the loop or stop your code wherever you are. In this case, we can actually use this to our advantage. So because we have this single return statement here, if a is bigger than or greater than or equal to b, then we're going to return a. Now, we need actually a second return statement. Even though I can only return one value, I can have multiple return statements in here that make sure that I do return some value. And because A is greater than or equal to B in this case, the default, the other side of the number line, right? If we say we have a little number line here, right, where A and B, if we know that A is greater than B, we return that. But what if they're switched? What if these two are switched? If this is A and this is B? Well, we know that if this is false, if our first one is false, then this must be true. So if this is false, B must be greater than A. So we don't have to check it. All we have to do is write return B. That's all that we have to do, because we know that the inverse of this is that B is bigger than or greater than A. So that's all that we have to do as far as logic is concerned. Go ahead and close out our method, and we can come back up here. Now, I can go ahead and I can call this method getBigger, and I can save that into a new variable. So I can say integer bigger or biggest equals or gets the value of my getBigger of x comma y. So this return statement sends back the data. So the return this returns an int. And because this returns an int, that int can then be saved into my variable biggest. And anywhere that I need an integer, I can call this. This could be called inside of a println statement if I needed to use the value there and I didn't need to save it for later. Remember, the reason we use variables is because we need to save it for later. So if I didn't need to save this value, I could just call it inside of a println statement and it would just see it as an integer. So here I'm able to do this. Now, one thing to note is the return statement, just like our pass by value, we also have return by value, which means that we're returning a copy of the value. So in the case of a primitive type, we don't actually pass the value itself, we pass a copy of the value. And when we pass back an object, and we can pass back objects, we could pass back a string, we could pass back another user-defined class here, we pass back a copy of the reference to whatever object we have or we're returning within here. So again, we can create a new object and we can pass that reference just like we did passing it in, we can pass it back out, pointing to the object in our memory location. So return by value returns a copy of the value, not the actual value itself from the method. All right, so that is return statements. Now we have a full toolbox in order to manipulate data, get it into and out of a method, and we understand the difference between primitive data types and object or class data types and how they interact within the memory and the pass and return by value. All right, in the next lesson, we're going to learn about that word static there and have a little fun with it. All right, I'll see you guys in the next lesson.